one, it's 3 feet in diameter. So it goes back to about 1756. And for Minnesota, that's well before Minnesota was a state. So I have my students figure out the history of that tree by looking at the rings. They look at that and for climate data from that. They also then do a tree survey. So they tell the history of the tree by looking at the rings, but then we have a woodlot adjacent to school and they have to determine a way to objectively survey that area for, see if I can do this. They have to survey for tree density, distribution, diversity, and age. So they come up with this huge data set of all this information, and then they come to this realization that the aspens are only 40 years old, but they're 70 feet tall, whereas there's these huge oaks that are 150, 200 years old, so that the land has changed, something happened. And then they dig into the history, and they have to figure out, they begin to realize that the school was built on a farm. And before there was grazing, and that's what kept the aspens at bay. But then when the school was built, all the aspens sprouted up, and they realize now that the history of the land is very different. The other thing that's really cool is they look at that tree cookie of the bur oak, and they always go like, well, what happened before 1800? Because everything in their history is like white European history. And they're like, well, what happened before 1800? It's like, well, let's talk about the Native Americans. So we go really deep into Dakota history, and look at that, how the indigenous population really affected the land and interacted with the land. So they gain a really deep appreciation for just this one small little woodlot, but in doing so, they really tell the story of the much.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I started to do the same thing Kat did, the reading The Forested Landscape by Tom Wessels. If you've never used that book, yeah. And I wonder if...
I have that book, but I haven't used it with students. And I also have like the field guide version. But I'd love to hear if anyone has tips on how they've used that. But I don't want to take too much of our group time. So...
and I was going to mention out of Leopold's book, the Sand County Almanac, he's got a whole chapter in there about the tree and, would you stop? The tree rings and the history. Like that was probably, I had my middle schoolers read it.
Oh, nice.
For last year. And even though some of them said it was really hard for them to read and understand because of the way he writes, that was probably like their favorite chapter. Like they totally all understood that one and just loved it. So that's another great text for like incorporating history as well.
Great. I haven't read that since college.
I think part of what we can think about for reopening too is these opportunities. I don't know what every state in each school is going to be allowed to do with having outside folks come into the school, but reaching out to your local historical society, and that someone mentioned that they partner, I think, with their historical society. So I think there are those folks out there, those organizations out there that have funding. They're desperate to connect with educators in schools, and it's really difficult. The challenge that I hear from them time and time again is how to find the teachers who are doing the work, how to sort of plug in with them. So this could be a really great opportunity.
I know I've done some work. I saw somebody in the comments that talked about logging, and last year I did a history unit, place-based history, and did a lot about logging. And I just reached out to the community members. We had a whole lot of older people who had been there, lived there their whole life, and they loved coming in. And so I also got some literacy in there because the kids had to write questions that they wanted to ask. And so it was very multi-dimensional, and I found that the people were really anxious or interested in helping me and helping the students, and it just made the experience that much deeper than just reading about it, but they got to hear about it. And then we went to a mill and got to see how they used to mill the trees and all of that, and some really funny stories, like just from the people who have, logged their whole life and just different stories that they have. And so I highly recommend just tapping the older people, and it's multi-generational, so you get that piece as well. So
thanks, Deanna. Andrea has this question about how you're fitting lessons into sort of a block, if you only have 50 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever your timetable is, but also as a high school teacher, how you're collaborating with other colleagues, I think is the question. But Andrea, feel free to chime in and speak up. And I guess I'm curious to hear from you all, folks who are in a sort of traditional school setting. I'm wondering if there might be talk in reopening for extending teaching time periods so that so that the students can be going outside where the virus is like less transmittable.
Yeah, our periods are about 80 minutes at our high school, unless they change things this year. But elementary school teachers can integrate all kinds of stuff. If they want to teach outside, they can teach reading outside, they can teach math outside. There's all kinds of ways you can do that. At the high school level, everything gets compartmentalized, and that has always really bothered me. As an ESOL teacher, I can combine things better, but it's a lot to fit into one period, even though it's 80 minutes.
One thing that is opening up possibilities, at least in Vermont, is the idea of flexible pathways for students where they're designing their own independent studies and internships. And that offers them a lot more freedom to explore what they're interested in. And if we connect them with mentors who have a focus in place-based things, or actually any topic that a kid could choose, you could connect with someone in the community and make it place-based and grounded. And so I think Maine has a similar program. I don't know if it's called the exact same thing, but more schools are having coordinators that are working with these students in a more independent way. And so it's not a typical class of 20 or 30, but there's a little bit more flexibility there.
That's coming from the school itself, or that's coming from, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak for my experience with 50-minute classes. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge to get outside and back in. So you really have to have your routine set. Like I walk where I want to go before and time it at a high school pace. So about 2 minutes slower than what I would normally do. And you have to be very explicit with the expectations and scaffolding. With regards to collaborating with other teachers, I have the luxury of my field ecology classes. I'm the only teacher. This is something I also want to bring to my biology classes, is getting outside. And we now have the staff dynamic that I think we can all get on board with taking kids outside on a fairly regular basis. Another big challenge is simply storing all of the stuff when we go out in the winter time. My whole classroom is full of boots and snow pants and stuff. So it's that's another whole thing in itself.
Jim, do you want to speak to how you are storing that? That might be, is that helpful for anyone? Or like how you even got everyone to have their gear? I feel like in elementary, it's an issue to make sure everyone has it, but in high school, it seems like an issue to get the students to put it on.
Kids at our school come to school in shorts and flip-flops all year, and we're talking Maine, so.
I usually go out the first or second day of class, and I say we're going out, and it's usually like 10 below or something like that. And there's always that one kid who has everything unzipped, and then they come back the next day and they got like the 1980s one-piece snowmobile suit because they know I'm not messing around. And I just trudge them right through the snow and say, here we go. And kids who can't relationship with the school lost and found, and I find stuff for them if they need it. So that, yeah, I think that's part of it, is being real And I know bringing them back in after that first cold day, they appreciate indoor forced air heating like they've never have before.
Thanks, Jim, and welcome, Betsy. We've introduced ourselves and we've just started the conversation. Folks are starting to ask questions and sharing their experiences and resources, so feel free to jump in. Oh yeah, so I'll make sure that everything in the chat gets put into these notes. I'm typing as you guys are talking, and I've also hit the record button, so we'll make sure that this is available on the website. Let's see, what else does anyone have a specific question? Otherwise, I'll pull something from the chat here.
I can talk a little bit about the program I'm making for the high schoolers. So specifically creating it for my daughter and a friend of hers. They actually want to become master naturalists, but they're not able to because they have to be, I think it's 16 to take the class. So I'm basically creating this program like a master naturalist program, which a lot of the different states have. I kind of asked the kids what they want to focus on. So I have 3 kids enrolled, and as of now, it's only going to have 7 kids. I'm going to keep it small, but most of them want to do like botany type stuff. So we're actually going to be doing some forestry stuff. We actually have a dendrochronology lab at one of the colleges that I'm hoping we can get to. We have a biomimicry center at one of the colleges. So my goal is to get them to some of the colleges and into some of the labs. But for our class time, which is going to be, they're going to be working. So they're going to be doing stewardship projects and citizen science projects, hopefully some like restoration work. So we're going to be meeting every other Friday later in the day when it's a little cooler here. So they, and also I wanted to be open to public schoolers since there is such a lack of programs for high schoolers. So we'll be like Friday afternoons, like I think at 4 to 6 or something like that. And, you know, they'll be actually doing work and collecting data. And then in between classes, I'm going to encourage them to go to some of the like free lectures that they have around here, like botanical gardens and things like that, where they can go with me. And then afterwards we can have discussions about it. So yeah, that's kind of the plan as of now. So just, yeah. And we'll be going to different places and hopefully working with some like local organizations like the Audubon Center, and we have a Native Plant Society. A lot of the kids are really into invasive species, so that's like a big focus for us this fall, actually in all the programs. So yeah.
Kathy, will you explain, how are you partnering with colleges and universities to use their labs? Is that what you said?
So a lot of them, they have these, we're hoping just to go kind of for a field trip type thing. They have both like University of Arizona and ASU, which is Arizona State University, both just have these, like the dendrochronology lab, they just have like all these samples of trees from all over Arizona and the history of them. And so I'm hoping we can just get in there, that they can explain some of what they're doing and the work that they're doing. We also have a lichen herbarium or something here as well. So yeah, a lot of them said they're open for field trips. So hoping we can just get the kids in, and hopefully, and I also do want to have some people come talk to the kids. So like some of the foresters come and talk to the kids as well. So I have not made all my contacts yet though. It's been really hard because everybody's closed down, and a lot of the plans I had, actually some of the places have completely closed. Like one of our environmental centers just is gone now. So that's kind of put a wrinkle in some of my plans.
So So I guess I would be curious, sort of going back to Andrea's question, and someone else sort of chimed up in the chat to speak to it a little bit, but this question of collaborating with your, with the colleagues in your school building, have folks had success with that? And if so, what's your strategy?
There's been a little bit of success with the like 7th, 8th, and 9th grade teams because they work in teams more. So it's a little bit more like an elementary model for those middle level teachers, and they do a lot of planning and collaborating together. And so sometimes there's crossover in the curriculum between the different classes that the students have, but sometimes they can also just shift their schedules a little bit more, so that if the science teacher is working on something really intensive, they can maybe take like 2 blocks instead of 1 in a given month to really have more time with their students. And then the English teacher whose class they might have been missing might come in and assist with that. So they've had a little bit of flexibility with that, but their kids travel a little bit more in like pods. So it's the same groups of students. And so it's a little bit easier to manipulate the schedule that way. But then we've also, one thing we did 1 or 2 years ago was have these like little meetups between teachers from different disciplines that we thought might have synergy with each other. So we had our Latin teacher and our horticulture teacher. We invited them to a lunch and said, how can you collaborate? Obviously, plants have Latin names. How can we, like, that's one obvious starting spot. And then we had our like shop teacher and our AP environmental science teacher come together because there was a vision about having students create tiny homes. And so we just facilitated a little bit of time and space for teachers with different disciplines to come together and have a brainstorm. And we just like gave them lunch and covered their lunch duty and said, you got 20 minutes, go. And a little bit of fruitful collaboration came out of that.
So you did that as an outside organization? Came into the school.
It was me. I'm a school staff member, and it was part of our. I was part of the education for sustainability classes at Shelburne Farms, and we were looking for ways to reinvigorate our school community after some big blows, and so that was one idea that we had.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Yeah, it was fun.
Can I say something? I would just say that to be patient, because you sort of plant a seed one semester and it's just the beginning. And then the next semester, a little more happens. It takes time. Like at my middle school, they do work as teams, and they actually meet as a group of team teachers often, like once a day pretty much. And even then, sometimes things the other teachers aren't convinced in the first round, you know, like the teacher that's really motivated brings it up one month, and then they kind of need to bring it up again, or they need to bring it up earlier so that they have time to plan. And just be patient. It doesn't always work the first time.
I'd like to echo what Betsy just said. It's absolutely start small. There is a ton of anxiety about kicking kids outside from teachers who aren't like us, perhaps. And that's just the very notion of going outside is terrifying for some. It could just mean let's go out and have a study session outside instead of inside, or giving them some unstructured time outside. So that the kids are comfortable with it, that the students are comfortable with it, that there's just those very basic boundaries that are set early, and that'll give the teachers the confidence to maybe go a little bit further. So starting small and baby steps. You can't just jump right in and do like a pond exploration or something.
Thank you both.
One question that I've been thinking a lot about is how it sounds like maybe our schools are going to start in person, but be prepared to transition to remote learning. And so I'm trying to think about how we can establish some really amazing place-based experiences early in the year so that kids can build on those when we're in a remote learning environment. And I would love to hear people's ideas about what topics or projects might be appropriate to do that around.
So I don't know if this is.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know how useful this is to other people, but for my middle school class this coming year, I was thinking about exactly that question of like, how can we make use of outdoor space in the fall? And how could this then be flexible to be done at home remotely or in the classroom and still be really hands-on and engaging? And so I decided to do something inspired by the game of Village. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but to basically have my students create a miniature village and then spend the year looking at the government. How do we live together in this village peacefully? Do we have laws? And creating a newspaper, as well as developing character and stuff like that. So my thought was to start outdoors and say like, this is our land here, for these miniature people. We are now moving into this environment. Let's look at people who lived in and moved into Vermont in the past. How did they live in villages? But then also like, what do we need to think about? And actually spend a lot of time out on the land, setting up where your house is going to go and kind of immersion in the outdoors place as they're starting to think about what this village is going to be like, to kind of ground that in as a place-based immersion experience. And then hopefully that makes it really concrete and grounded, and we can build on into some of the more theoretical places from there. And then hopefully in the spring, come back outside and bring it all together. So that's something that's been on my mind.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Are you thinking of having them actually build little houses and everything and like have that be a real location with houses and streets?
I am, although I don't think we're going to build something that we can leave outside. Like I think the houses are probably going to end up being cardboard, but I'm hoping that they can do work on their actual site and just bring the houses back and forth each time. We have long blocks. We have 90-minute blocks. So that's enough time to haul a bunch of stuff out there and get going and have it be a meaningful time outside.
I did something similar when we had to go online, because the school I used to work at is very outdoor. It was hard for us to make that transition because we actually don't use computers. So I did something similar to the village thing, and I called it like a mud village because it was mud season in Maine. And so the kids all had places that they could go outside and they could build their mud village. And I had them do similar to what Rebecca was saying, is that, who lives there. You had to actually, they graphed it out. I incorporated some math. And so they did graphing. They had to do coordinate points and learn their planes and all of that. And then eventually they had to write a story about the inhabitants of the village. And so if you're thinking about doing something like that next year, what I had them do was everybody worked at it at home, and then they took a picture and they gave me the picture. They sent the picture. So that way, if you do end up not being in school, they can always still do it they could start it at home and then finish it at home and then still show everybody through the picture. But I did a lot of, I find that writing is very easy to do outside. You can do it anywhere and be inspired by it. Or I did like a witch's brew. So they had to think about natural materials that they wanted to put into a witch's brew, and they had to make it. And, so then they had to make a recipe for it, and then they had to write what are you going to use it for and that sort of thing. So for me, that's really where I got a lot of, because they did a lot of making and then a lot of writing about what they were making. So that's kind of how I did a lot of my stuff. So that helps.
On a maybe a more subject agnostic lens, I have my kids do sit spots 1 day a week every week for the whole semester. And that's what I had my field ecology kids do this spring. I had scavenger hunts that dug deeper. So like started off, something easy, like find a conifer tree or something, and ended with, finding a sentinel bird alarm or some crazy deep awareness thing. So something like that could be used for language arts. You could do that for biology. Again, just to get them out and aware, and really connecting with one single place. And I've been doing that for like 10 years in my regular classes. And I will tell you that my high schoolers are the most stressed out and anxious people I know. And when they go outside, the stuff they have written in their journals brings tears to my eyes, but also a little bit of hope, because they're finding some of the skills to deal with the reality of what their life is like nowadays in school. So again, that could be done with any class, language arts, math, you name it. You could go and sit by a tree and write. Whatever you write about is up to you. But if you want more about that, I can talk at length about all that stuff.
I do have a question about that, actually, Jim. Do you start out giving them writing prompts and then eventually they go off on their own, or or do you just sit them down and say, write whatever you want?
Okay, I froze for a moment. Yes would be the answer for both of those. When they are at their sit spot, I think it's important for them to have the freedom they want. So the observations they make are their own. I give them what I call a reflection question that's based in the content that we're doing that week. And so that there's a kind of a two-part observation. So there's the actual observations, and then there's a reflection question grounded in content.
Sorry. You can finish, Jim.
I had an afterthought. Sorry, Betsy. It's important for anything outside to have students take ownership of it. That's one of like the biggest things that I see. Oh, sorry. Is we can't just take what we do inside and bring it outside and say, we're doing nature ed. We have to make something that's that ownership, that play space. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think that's one thing. So making it their own is super, super important.
I do a middle school nature writing class, usually in the fall. And I tend to give them very specific prompts, but I always give them the option to write on their own. Because some of my really strong writers don't need a prompt anymore. But some of them really need a prompt. Like some of them could not function without a prompt. So I tend to give a choice, and I sort of pull the kids aside that seem like they're ready to not have a prompt. But
Thanks. That's really helpful, you guys. I'm wondering, we have like just under 10 minutes left. I'm wondering if anyone else has, if they showed up with a question that they're really dying to look for some feedback on or hoping to get an answer to.
I'm always looking for like already written out remote learning curriculum for middle school. So, I mean, I think all of us were like throwing stuff together, so I can see why people might feel shy about sharing what they did. But if anyone ever wants to like share what they've been doing with Liza, so other people can snag it, I think. And I know there's a zillion resources out there on the web, but I'm curious what like actually got used by actual teachers with actual middle schoolers, actually on a computer. That's what interests me. But, just compiling those resources always interests me, and sharing those.
Betsy, when you say it was used on a computer, so you mean specifically what curriculum folks were using during remote learning?
Just because I have less of that, that's why, yeah.
I can speak to that. So for my school district, the biggest issue that I faced was that all of my students had different access to computers and internet. So some were on school Chromebooks, some were on their phones, some were on laptops. Some of them couldn't log into our online textbook. And so what I ended up doing was giving them like 10 different resources. So there was an article from Science News for Students. There was a video from Bill Nye. There was one from Magic School Bus. There was some, et cetera, et cetera. And so then I would have them write a summary of what they learned this week based on any of the resources that they could access. And so it ended up being a challenge for me because I couldn't ask specific questions to really push their understanding. They could kind of write whatever they had learned, and I kind of had to accept it as long as it was reasonable. So that was tough for me, but I would have liked to do more activities and outdoor options. Like I could have said, watch this video, read this article, or go outside and observe X, Y, and Z, or try this little experiment on your kitchen counter. So I would have liked to pull more of that in, but it's sort of crazy and, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, that was what I was attempting to do, is give an option for outdoor learning. And, some people took it. So I'm always like, you're always curious about other options for outdoor learning curriculum where kids can quickly do an activity,
I was going to say, look at like a lot of the national organizations like Audubon had put together like a bunch of really great resources and ideas that you could post that had the kids going outside. And so like the big organizations like that, like I know the national parks have put some stuff together. Audubon, I think Cornell has some stuff, and they were specifically resources that like educators could share with their students. And a lot of them were, go outside and do this and then kind of come back and report your findings. Some of them were even the kids going out like while you were on with them, like a Zoom call or whatever, and like recording bird sounds or things like that. So, so yeah, I would look at those kind of places.
That also makes me wonder about what you just said, going outside and recording bird sounds makes me think about like that, the opportunities for connecting, collaborating, and integrating with other teachers. So it's like if as the science teacher, you're doing this, to be able to partner up with, the English teacher, whoever's doing the writing curriculum, and reading curriculum. It just seems like there's so many great opportunities for really like rich literature to be interwoven with the sciences and history. I mean, every subject, but.
Or even music. It sounds like maybe they're going to be discouraging like wind instruments and chorus and stuff this fall. So your music teachers might have some capacity and want to do some birdsong exploration.
That's true. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you're familiar with iNaturalist, but you can make a project, your own project on there. So So like I've got 3 right now. One was specifically for my students to post things that they were finding, you know, in their backyards. And then I made one that's just kind of like a national one, just to try to get other kids to get involved, like one specifically about birds. But you can make your own project either for your own school or whatever, and they can ID or upload and ID what they're seeing around their homes. And then, you know, you can turn that into a whole project as well, because you could get into like, what's the biodiversity in our urban city or whatever. And I mean, that's super easy, and they don't even need an app. They don't even need a phone to do it, because you cannot access iNaturalist on your computer and just take pictures with a regular camera and upload them. So even if they don't have a phone, they can still participate. Like that's how most of my kids do it. So that's another good resource.
So I think we have time for one last question. But also I just want to say, I feel like you guys are sharing really amazing resources. And I'm plugging everything into the notes that I'll get on our website. Is there one last question out there?
I just wonder if it makes sense to have another meeting in the late summer once our school districts have crystallized around a structure and we have a little bit more concrete to work with.
Yeah, I'm totally open to that. So when you say late summer, I think like the end of August, but I'm also imagining maybe the middle of August.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, early or middle of August.
Are folks interested in that? Does that, I mean, I can always just put it out there and whoever shows up, shows up.
We're supposed to know something by like August 1st. So I definitely would want to know, would want to meet after August 1st. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be mid-August.
Yeah, and our teachers come back on August 24th.
Yeah, so we need time to use what we learned together, so to put it together.
Okay, I'm bringing up the calendar here just so I can see August 1st. Oh, right. So maybe even that, I'm not sure if this works for others, but even later in that first week of August, like the 5th or 6th?
Maybe the next one.
The next week.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
All right, so like the 11th or 12th?
Yeah, yeah.
Does that seem about right for others?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great. I'll get that set up, and make sure that you all get an email about that for sure. And then I'll also put it up on our website, and it'll go in the our July newsletter. So I guess I should also say that if you are, I'm never clear how people are finding these meetings anymore because we've gone so virtual. So if you're not already plugged into the network, then you can join on, here's the website, and then you automatically get the monthly newsletter that has all sorts of resources as well as the upcoming meetings. Thank you all so much for being here. It's really good to see you all, and I appreciate you sharing your energies and resources, and I hope this felt helpful and productive.
Yes, thank you. Good
Yeah,
luck.
sorry I was late.
That's okay. It's really fun to have folks from all over too. I feel like it really feeds the conversation. So thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right. Take good care. Enjoy your afternoon. See you later.
Bye.
Are you doing the 2 o'clock one?
2 o'clock your time. Yes.